Let me briefly explain my background of my special experience of immersive thinking. How to live was a very big question to me. In order not to regret at the end of my life, how should I live? That was the big question. Finally, I got the clear answer. I understand what regret means. I realized that regretting does not depend on what kind of job you have, what kind of work you are doing, but it depends on how you live. Okay? So if you fully utilize your potential, your ability inside, then you don't have to regret. But if you do not utilize that, if you just use less than 1% of your potential, then you would regret. So that's my understanding. So I try to fully utilize my brain, my ability. So when I found something to think about, when we are doing some experiment, there are some data which are very difficult to understand. So before I tried to understand that, I spent some time, but if I made no progress, I just skip. But after that time, if I found something to think intentionally, I try to think without stopping for a second, intentionally. So after a few days of my struggle, I reach a state of perfect concentration where my whole consciousness is occupied by that problem. Okay? So if I reach that problem, if I reach that state, miraculous ideas come out so frequently. And I felt quite happy too. Okay? So after experiencing that, I challenge, because I understand, I knew, I thought that I knew how to use my brain, how to activate my brain. I challenge big problems in the field of material science engineering. So I challenged some problem which were not solved for more than 50 years, 60 years, or 70 years. It took only about 1 or 2 months or 3 months to solve those problems. So people were interested in my immersive thinking. So I was invited to give a talk in many places. And the audience advised me to publish the book on my experience of immersive thinking. So I published the book. It's book on immersive thinking in 2007. And this book became a bestseller with more than about 400,000 copies being sold. And it's translated in China and Taiwan. Then I published another book because when I experienced that over and over again, it's highly reproducible. Okay, so I thought there must be some principle in this. So I tried to understand that. So I started to read some book on neuroscience to understand that one. So I tried to understand the principle of my immersive thinking. Then I published the second book in 2011. And finally, I published the book which focused on study and education, especially education for creativity. And this book was also translated in Taiwan. So the brain activation accompanied by the generation of creative ideas by immersive thinking was highly reproducible. So whenever I reach that state, bright ideas, creative ideas come out. It's highly reproducible, so I could solve many big problems. So because those problems were so difficult that I could not solve them for my lifetime if I did not use such an immersive thinking. So I thought myself, even I could solve such a big problem, then how about the great scientists who solve so many creative problems? Would that they also did immersive thinking? Okay, that was my thinking. So how about great scientists with great creative achievements? Was their creativity also attributed to immersive thinking? So I made a literature survey, and I realized that most those great scientists also did immersive thinking. There are many examples, but I'll just show only a few. When Newton was asked how he discovered law of gravity, he simply answered by thinking on it continually. And Einstein said, I think and think for months and years. 99 times the conclusion is false, the 100th time I'm right. Okay, many Nobel Prize scientists and many successful businessmen, many inventors, they all did immersive thinking. Okay, so by thinking on it continually, I'm not sure how it sounds to you, but to me, these statements touch my heart because I did it myself and I know how I changed. So let me briefly explain my experience on immersive thinking. And I challenge very big problems which were not solved for more than 50 or 60 years. And first day, I tried to think without stopping, intentionally, okay, without stopping for a second. But what happened is this: no progress at all. Okay. When I make a progress, then I can concentrate. But if I do not make any progress, I cannot concentrate. Concentration is very difficult. So a lot of distractions, distractions. I'm interrupted by distractions. And it's boring and monotonous. It's kind of, most monotonous experience you might have in your life. Very monotonous. And at the end of the day, and your spirit is very low and gloomy feeling. And you are convinced that you cannot solve this problem because it's so difficult. So you are just wasting your time. Okay? And at the end of the day passes without any progress in spite of my continuous struggling. But a very important thing, or the thing we can be positive about life, as long as I struggle to solve the problem, then some change occur in my brain. So I define that by degree of immersion. Those degree of immersion increase 30 to 40% if I make an effort. Okay? It's highly reproducible. It's highly reproducible. Even though I do not make any visible achievement, but my brain change. Second day, less distraction than the first day. Some ideas come out, but not so important, not so useful. I feel sleepy while thinking, and that happened also the first day. If I feel sleepy, I just take a nap, sitting on the chair. And less monotonous than the first day, but at the end of the second day, also the day passed without any meaningful progress. but degree of immersion increased to 60 to 70%. Okay? And the third day, it can happen in the morning or in the afternoon. I reach the perfect concentration. So my consciousness is fully occupied by that problem. Then no distraction, 100% concentration, and curious about the problem becomes so high that you think almost automatically. Okay? In this case, even though you do not make intentional effort, it's kind of, you just think automatically. And you have a high spirit, and you are convinced to solve the problem. So this emotional change is very in high contrast. Okay? In contrast with the first day, you are convinced, you are sure to solve the problem. Okay? Then you are feeling very good, and creative or miraculous ideas come out so frequently. Okay? All these processes are very highly reproducible, and degree of immersion reach 100%. So when I reach this state, if the problem is not so difficult, I can solve it. Most of the problem I can solve it, but the big problem which are unsolved for more than 50 years, I cannot solve them. But I realized many important facts. Okay? Many important facts. So I believe that I'm very close to the problem. Okay? More than anybody else. I'm closest to the problem. So I'm going to solve it. But I don't know the answer, but I'm sure I'm going to solve it. Okay? So I have to maintain this kind of immersive thinking for more than few months to solve the problem. Then for a few months, I just think about the problem intensively without stopping. Then for a few months, all my brain are filled with that problem. Then the reason to live is to solve the problem. Even if I'm going to die tomorrow, I'll not be afraid of that. But the only one thing which I feel sorry for is that I could not solve that problem. So, only interested in solving the problem, solving it becomes a reason to live, and maximum curiosity and values, and life becomes very simple. As far as you think about it, you are the happiest man in the world. If you cannot, you are the most miserable man in the world. Okay? So, if I wake up in the middle of the night, my families are sleeping, and I go to the living room, then world is silent, and in the whole universe, only the problem and I exist. And I think this might be the maximum concentration that man can have. And then I have a maximum passion because the reason to live is to solve the problem. So if these two are combined, okay, and if you maintain this state more than a few weeks or a few months or a few years, then I'm sure you can solve any problems. Okay? Because the ideas, creative ideas, come out so frequently, I try to understand the principle of creative ideas. Okay? So whenever ideas come out, then I write them down. Then I try to understand how these ideas come out. Then there's no intermediate stage. It just come from nothing. I was just lucky at the time. It just happened, So I just found out that idea by chance, something like that. So whenever ideas come out, I wrote them down and I look back. how these ideas are formed, then there's no intermediate stage. Okay, that happened continuously for a few months. So it was very strange. Whenever I reach that state of immersive thinking, creative ideas come out so frequently, but I didn't understand the principle. Okay, there's a correlation between immersive thinking and the frequency of creative ideas, but I cannot understand how ideas are formed. Then I had a very special experience. At the time, one day I felt great ideas coming up, but did not know what it was. Okay? At that time, my door was open and somebody stood there at my door to meet me. If I turned to him, I would lose that idea because the idea was so important. I could not turn to him. I try not to be interrupted by him until I, think about that idea. That idea comes to the level of consciousness. So I wrote them down, and I turned to him, but he was gone. Still, I don't know who it was. Okay, so then what does that mean? I knew it's important. I felt that it's very important, but I didn't know what it was. So what it means? So that means the idea did not come out at that time. It was formed much earlier. Okay? Because I know it's important. Okay? That means that idea was not formed. So then when was that formed? That answer was very easy. It's formed during sleep. I was sure about that because whenever I wake up in the middle of the night, the frequency of idea is much, much higher than that of daytimes. Okay? Because I experienced that over and over again, I was so sure. Whenever I sleep, if I wake up in the middle of the night, the frequency of idea is very high. So I thought that those ideas must have been formed during sleep. So I began to read, how our brain changed during sleep. Okay, so there was a Professor Alan Hobson from Harvard. He was a very famous man in this area. So in his book of dreaming, this table is from this book. So physiological basis for the differences between waking and sleeping consciousness. So what it says, during sleep, recent memory is diminished. So because of aminergic demodulation, activated representations are not restored in memory. But remote memory is enhanced during sleep. So this inhibition of a network storing mnemonic representations increase access to consciousness. So according to my understanding of this description, during daytime, so we store memory and retrieve memory from our long-term memory. During daytime, our ability to store memory is increased, but our ability to retrieve idea from long-term memory is decreased. But during sleep, it's opposite. Our ability to store memory is decreased, but our ability to retrieve memory is increased. So that means every night during sleep, people has kind of a genius brain, creative brain. Okay? But you cannot utilize that brain unless you do immersive thinking. Okay? When you do immersive thinking, you just think during sleep. So you just retrieve the related ideas. But if you do not do the immersive thinking, you don't have the opportunity to retrieve that. Because during sleep, you don't have a consciousness. You cannot control. So that's my conclusion. And I described that, and my book was published in 2007. And 2008, I read this article. It's published on Times Online. Waiting for that life-changing idea, just sleep on it. From solving problems to flashes of inspiration, scientists are beginning to unravel the creative powerhouse that is the mind at night. And there is now it's established that creativity is formed during sleep. So there's one video I'll show you.
Science Central.
Psychology grad student Matt Hall is wired for a nap. For him, hitting the books often calls for hitting the hay.
If I'm trying to get through a paper and I just find myself not processing it, I'll just go ahead and take a nap.
Now a study of Hall and 76 other volunteers shows that napping enhances creative problem solving, but only if the nap includes REM sleep.
Professor Mednek studied the relation between REM sleep and creativity. So she found out correlation between REM sleep and creativity. And according to my literature survey, some scientists claim that non-REM sleep is responsible for creativity. So I just guessed that there are many kinds of creativity. Creativity in arts and creativity in science. So some creativity is enhanced during REM sleep. Some other creativity is enhanced non-REM sleep. That's my understanding.
Have these kind of fanciful dreams, very bizarre. You can't quite figure out how these different ideas are connected, but it's likely that this is the same process.
Mednick says only naps longer than 60 minutes will have REM sleep. That sounds good to Hall.
I feel like I've been validated in my choice to nap every now and then. It feels like it's not actually wasting time. It's probably a pretty good idea.
One that may help you dream up other good ideas. Brad Closa, Science Central News.
So you will come up with creative ideas if you think long enough. I think it's a law, kind of a law. It's highly reproducible, so it's a kind of a law. But it's that simple, okay? The creative ideas, getting creative ideas is that simple. Then what's the problem? The problem is George Bernard Shaw said, few people think more than 2 or 3 times a year. I've made an international reputation for myself by thinking once or twice a week. Okay? And Bertrand Russell said, most people would sooner die than think. That's true. That's true. Because I ask my students to think. Okay? I emphasize on thinking very much, but they would not think. Okay? So I totally agree with what they are saying. So thinking itself is a very difficult job. We have to understand that. Thinking itself is a very difficult job unless you are educated to think. Okay? So unless you are not educated from childhood, thinking is a very difficult job. So I think this is the most important thing in education. So we cannot have Newton's or Einstein's brain, but we can be educated to mimic their immersive thinking. According to my experience, even by mimicking their immersive thinking, we can be creative enough. Okay? But my experience tells that thinking ability should be educated in a very gradual way. Otherwise, the educational training for thinking will be very painful. And another thing we should remind, thinking ability differs for each individual. Even though they are same grade, their ability change a lot. There are a lot big difference between individuals. So I suggest education for creativity, when you teach the area of triangle, so do not teach them first, but ask them to try to find it themselves. They learn already how to evaluate, how to calculate the area of a square. Okay, then you just give them this question. The height is 4 and base is 6. What's the area of triangle? Okay, and some students would say that I did not learn yet. Okay, so I know you did not learn, but try to find out yourself. Okay, if they do not give up, and if they spend like 5 or 10 minutes, okay, they would realize that they got some inspiration that the area of triangle would be half of square. Okay, so more difficult problem is the area of acute triangle. And when you teach fractions, so just teach the fundamental concept of fraction first. Then do not teach how to add the fraction, but give the problem themselves. So let them solve themselves. Okay? If they cannot make it, then do not teach it, but explain the basic concept of fractions. Okay? So if they understand the concept of fraction, they can do themselves. So if they can add fraction of same denominator, if they can do very well, then you can give them more challenging problems, like with addition of fraction with different denominator, like this. Okay, this time, first they would think it would be impossible because they have different denominator. But if they think enough, they would realize that 1 or 2 might be equal to 2 to 4. Okay, so they solve it. So they can solve it very well. Then you can give them more challenging problem like this. So if students solve the problem without having learned how to reduce fraction to common denominator, they must be creative. So it's an intellectual challenge. They are forced to think creatively, and they build up the ability to think immersively. And if these students, child, are educated in this way for more than 6 years, then their ability to think increase, and their ability to think long time is increased. Then you can, and they become a middle school student, then you can give them a more challenging problem like this. Prove that the sum of inner angles of triangle is 180. This problem was solved by Pascal when he was 12. And give them the sum of natural number. This problem was solved by Gauss when he was young. And give them they let them solve to find out the relation among A, B, C of right triangle. And also let them find out the slope, instantaneous slope of this curve, which corresponds to calculus. According to my experience, if they think enough, they solve this problem. Okay, some students take it takes a lot of time, but if they think long enough, they solve this problem. That means they have potential. They have potential, or they have genius of Pascal, Gauss, Pythagoras, Newton. Okay, so it's just problem of thinking. Okay, how long, the problem, how long you think. So I also apply the similar concept to my teaching at class. So my way of teaching was selected as an excellent class, so they prepared the CD for this. So I call this thinking-based learning, where it's a kind of question and answer class. So when I teach Introduction to Material Science and Engineering, it's course for freshmen and sophomore. It's a phase diagram. Usually, professor teaches, they explain this, showing this slide. But in my case, I just make it blank like this. So let the student draw themselves. They have to think and they have to draw. Okay? Then I just come back and forth and examine what they are doing, and I encourage, if they are doing well, I encourage them. If they cannot understand what it means, then I give them some hint. Okay? So after they solve, then I explain this. Okay? Also, when I teach phase transformation of materials, this is the course for junior and senior students. And usually, this is, professor teaches this, okay? But instead of showing this, I first ask a question. It's an enthalpy of liquid and enthalpy of solid, okay? It's a very easy question, actually. The student answer, then I show that. Also, I ask, which is larger, entropy of liquid, entropy of solid? Okay, then, this, like this. Usually, professor teaches this and this, but I just make it a question. So, this kind of thing. Also, usually they teach the relation between Gibbs free energy and phase diagram, but instead of showing this, I show just this and let them draw the relation of Gibbs free energy at temperature T1, T2, melting point of A and melting point of B, and T3. So students have to draw, okay? And I go back and forth and examine. Then I explain this, like this. In this case, I show the free energy between liquid and solid at different temperature, and they should draw phase diagram from this. So they have to draw themselves. This is the way I teach. So it gives students intellectual challenge, and they are forced to think, and they learn by thinking. They understand much deeper. Okay? And I think it will be more effective if a student watch the online lecture, just a lecture, okay, simultaneously. After my lecture, if they watch online lecture, then it will be much more effective. Then I can spend more time for students to think. Then what would be students' response? It's written in Korean. Okay, so I will translate very briefly. This student, he said, even though he's an engineering student, he's lose interest in engineering. So he avoid studying engineering, textbook. But after he attended my lecture, if I learn like this way, other class, how helpful it would be, and I could understand better. And he enjoyed my class and attended my class with interest. And he enjoyed learning in my class, enjoyed learning and understanding in my class. So another student, since he was the first semester of a junior, this is his first time to send the email because she was moved by the class, moved by the lecture. So he was also didn't like the major, his major, and he was unhappy about his major. So there's a graduate student. In fact, after he went to university, he didn't study hard, and he hated to study because it was not interesting at all. The reason why he went to graduate student, he became graduate student, it wasn't because he liked studying, but his parents asked him. Also, he didn't want to go to the army. But after listening my class, he became interested in research and study. And he forgot the pleasure of solving the problem, the pleasure and of achievement of solving the problem. I enlightened this again. I kind of awakened this pleasure. So thanks to it, I'm interested in my research, and he solved the problem as he taught in the class by simplifying the problem, and so this kind of thing. So this is evaluation. After the semester, students evaluate each lecture. So they say that because I let them think, they are quite. It's very good because I let them think. Before teaching anything, I let them think. So they like that kind of lecture. So this is the most memorable lecture since he went to college. All of those things. The teaching method which induced thinking was so attractive. So it's very impressive that the professor asked the question, and so all of those things. Thanks for enforcing my ability to think. They could learn how to think. All those things. Yeah. So I like to conclude my talk by quoting Robert Heinlein's teaching consists of causing people to go into situation from which they cannot escape without thinking. Do not handicap your children by making their lives easy. Okay. Thanks.